The battle had ended before the sun rose over Earth's horizon, but the echoes of destruction still lingered in the void of space. Human fleets lay shattered among the debris of interstellar warfare, twisted metal and drifting ships a testament to the aliens' overwhelming power. The Coalition, a union of alien species that had spanned multiple galaxies, had invaded Earth swiftly, their technology far beyond anything humanity had anticipated. For most people, the war was over the moment it began, but for Captain Elias Kane, it had been far from finished. Elias had survived the final clash by a combination of luck, training, and stubborn refusal to surrender. He floated in the wreckage of his ship, the comms dead, the engines destroyed, and the once bright stars outside his viewport flickering with the remnants of laser fire. When the alien ships descended, calm and precise, he was ready, or at least as ready as a lone human could be against an enemy who saw thousands as expendable. It was then that he first saw her, standing aboard the flagship that had led the assault, tall and commanding, her skin shimmering with faint metallic hues that caught the light like liquid silver. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and frighteningly calm. There was no mercy in her gaze, but there was curiosity, a strange, almost human curiosity that made Elias' chest tighten. She moved among her soldiers with the grace of a predator, and yet when she looked at him, it was as if the battle had become personal. "You survived," she said, her voice melodious but cold, each word precise and deliberate. "I will claim you." Claim him as a spoil of war. He had faced death countless times on Earth, in the training simulations, in missions that ended in firefights with rebel factions or rogue colonies. But never had he imagined his survival would end with him being claimed, like an object or a trophy. "I don't belong to anyone," he said cautiously, his voice steady despite the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. Her eyes narrowed, but instead of anger, there was amusement. "You will," she said, and with a gesture her soldiers moved forward to secure him. The ride to her flagship was silent except for the hum of alien engines. Elias studied her from across the transport chamber. Her presence was commanding, magnetic, almost impossible to ignore. He realized that in all his years of surviving chaos and combat, he had never encountered an enemy like this. She didn't rely on brute force alone. She relied on control, on presence, on the ability to unsettle anyone who faced her. Days passed aboard the flagship, and Elias began to learn the rules of survival in captivity. The aliens did not treat him with cruelty, at least not openly. He was given food and quarters, though far from comfortable, and he was allowed limited movement under supervision. But every interaction with her reminded him of his place. He was the spoil of war, and yet there was a strange tension between them, a current that neither could deny. She observed him constantly. Sometimes it was subtle, a tilt of her head, a glance that lingered a heartbeat too long. Sometimes it was more direct, questions that seemed innocuous but carried weight, probing the limits of his resolve and patience. She asked about humanity's history, its wars, its triumphs and failures. Elias answered carefully, never giving more than necessary but never lying. "Humans are fragile," she said one evening, her eyes reflecting the lights of distant stars. "You fight with your bodies and your machines, but you have nothing that can truly endure in the galaxy. Adaptation is one thing, endurance is another. I will see if you possess it." Elias learned their routines, their technologies, their ways of thinking. He observed the alien hierarchy, noting how they obeyed her without question, their loyalty absolute. It was both fascinating and frightening. He had fought human soldiers who sometimes refused orders, rebels who defied even logic, and yet here her command was unquestioned. It was a level of discipline that humans rarely achieved, but Elias noticed cracks, small imperfections in their armor of control, signs of individuality suppressed but not eliminated. Elias began to test her limits subtly. Small defiance, minor disagreements, questioning orders in ways that challenged her authority but never outright threatened it. Each time she observed, weighing, calculating. And each time she allowed it, letting him prove that humanity's resilience was not mere stubbornness, but something deeper, a refusal to be erased. Then came the day she approached him in the observation chamber, where the stars stretched infinitely beyond the glass. She stood silently for a moment, watching him examine a holographic map of the galaxy. "You are different," she said finally. "I expected compliance or fear. Instead, you persist, you endure. I cannot ignore that. Perhaps there is more to you than I realized." Yet he understood her logic. Humans, despite their weaknesses in technology and numbers, were unpredictable, unpredictable enough to matter. From that day, the interactions between them changed subtly. She began sharing knowledge, allowing him access to more information about her people, their ships, their strategies. In return, he provided insights into human psychology, human tactics, and the one thing that aliens could never predict fully, human instinct. She learned that humans were capable of innovation even under pressure, and that sometimes restraint was as powerful as aggression. Elias realized that in a strange way, he had become more than a prisoner. He had become a teacher, a strategist, and a test of her own assumptions. Humanity, he thought, was clever in ways even advanced aliens could not always grasp, and she, for all her power, was beginning to understand that the galaxy underestimated them at its own peril. One evening, she entered his quarters, an unusual quiet in her movements. She did not speak immediately, simply observed him as he tended to his small, personal items, remnants of Earth he had carried. "You are persistent," she said finally. "Not merely in survival, but in spirit. You do not bend even when the galaxy assumes you will. That is remarkable. We adapt because we have no choice, and yet we do more than adapt. We endure, and sometimes we thrive. Or perhaps you only think you have claimed me." The human who should have been broken was not, and the alien commander who should have felt triumph was now intrigued, challenged, and in ways she did not yet understand, connected to him. As the flagship glided through space, the war over Earth's surface long forgotten for now, Elias Kane understood one truth clearly. Survival was not about hiding or surrendering. Survival was about refusing to be erased, refusing to be underestimated, and refusing to let the galaxy define what it meant to be human. And in that quiet, tense alliance, he realized that he had already begun winning in ways no one, not even the aliens, could yet see. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, but Elias did not feel fear. He felt opportunity, challenge, and the weight of potential. Humanity had survived countless threats, and this alien war commander, with her unmatched skill and her unyielding presence, was simply the newest test. And tests, Elias knew, were meant to be passed. Somewhere deep in the flagship, she watched him, a strange tension in her posture. For the first time in her career, she felt uncertain about the outcome of a claim. She had taken him as a spoil of war, believing victory was assured. Yet now she wondered if she had inadvertently unleashed something far greater, a human spirit that refused to bend. The galaxy, it seemed, had not seen the last of humanity yet, and neither had she. Time moved differently aboard the alien flagship. To Elias Kane, each day was both predictable and unsettling. The crew maintained perfect routines, the engines hummed without pause, and the galaxy outside spun with quiet indifference. Yet among the precision and order, Elias noticed a subtle shift, an attention that seemed to follow him, a careful observation from the alien commander who had claimed him as her spoil of war. She was not the same as before. Once her gaze had been sharp, cold, a tool of authority. Now it lingered in unexpected ways. She watched his movements with curiosity, as though each small action might reveal something hidden about humanity itself. Elias understood why. Humans were unpredictable. They adapted in ways aliens often overlooked. Even in defeat, humans found small victories in survival, in thought, in defiance. And she, for all her power, was beginning to recognize it. The first sign came during their training simulations. Elias had requested, politely, carefully, to participate in the alien tactical drills, not to challenge her authority, but to observe and learn. She allowed it, intrigued by the audacity of a human soldier willing to face her without fear. The drills were unlike anything humans had designed. Alien combat favored anticipation, psychic coordination, and flawless execution. One mistake, no matter how small, meant defeat. Yet Elias moved with calm efficiency. He studied the patterns of the simulations, predicted movements, and used alien techniques against them with slight modifications. Each time he succeeded, the commander's eyes widened imperceptibly. "You are skilled," she admitted during one session, her voice carefully neutral. "For one so fragile." Elias could sense her mind turning, weighing his words, testing the limits of what she believed about humans. That small acknowledgement was more dangerous than an attack in battle. It meant curiosity, a crack in certainty. And humans, Elias thought, thrived when others doubted them. Days passed, and their interactions shifted subtly. She began to question him about human history, culture, and strategy, not for amusement but out of genuine interest. Elias answered cautiously, revealing enough to intrigue, never enough to endanger Earth's secrets. But even in measured words, he conveyed the essential truth. Humans endure. Humans adapt. Humans survive. One evening, she called him to the observation deck. Stars stretched infinitely beyond the reinforced glass, distant worlds spinning silently in the dark. She stood silently, letting the quiet fill the space before speaking. "Tell me again," she said, "how your species survived countless wars, countless disasters, yet remains intact." "We fight not because we crave destruction, but because survival demands it. We face impossible odds, and we refuse to give up. It is what makes us dangerous in ways you may not expect." The flagship was dispatched to a contested sector, a neutral system rich in resources. Their mission was to secure control and eliminate any resistance. Elias was allowed to observe, and when the opportunity arose, he suggested subtle tactical improvements, adjustments that were efficient but unexpected. The alien officers hesitated, debating the merit of the humans' ideas. The commander, after a long pause, implemented them. The operation succeeded beyond expectation. Losses were minimal and the territory secured quickly. The crew's confidence grew, but the commander's expression was unreadable. She had allowed a human to guide a significant operation. That choice alone would have been unthinkable months ago. After the operation, she approached him in her private chamber. The room was dim, lit by soft ambient light that reflected off the walls like liquid metal. "You continue to surprise me," she said. "You are small in stature, limited in your technology, yet your presence changes outcomes. I underestimated you." "Underestimating humans has been a mistake countless species have made. I am no exception, apparently." He had felt the sting of it before, but now in the way she spoke there was recognition of something deeper, something she could not fully name. Elias understood that she was beginning to respect, perhaps even fear, the resilience that humanity carried quietly without fanfare or display. The following days brought more subtle tests. She observed how he interacted with alien crew members, noting his patience, his strategic thinking, and his ability to command respect without overt authority. Humans, Elias knew, had a different kind of strength. It was not physical, though they could fight with brutality when necessary. It was not technological superiority, though humans could adapt alien tools creatively. It was resilience, the refusal to be erased, the capacity to endure and adapt, and the determination to find opportunity in even the bleakest circumstances. One morning, she entered the training bay unexpectedly, observing him as he practiced maneuvers with other human prisoners still under her watch. His leadership was subtle, guiding without dominating, demonstrating strategy without arrogance. The aliens in the room whispered to one another, intrigued by how effortlessly the human commanded attention despite his captivity. "You lead differently than your species often does," she remarked. "You influence without force, yet they follow. How do you do this?" "It's about loyalty, trust, and understanding the people around you. You gain respect not by fear alone, but by showing you value those who follow you." "Perhaps I misjudged your species entirely." The human before her was not broken, not fearful, and not submissive. He was a puzzle, one that challenged every assumption she held about conquest, control, and power. As the days became weeks, she began to involve him more. Discussions about strategy, culture, and philosophy became common. She wanted his insight, not because she trusted him fully, but because she could not ignore the truths he offered. Humans, she realized, had a way of seeing opportunity and risk that aliens often missed. They acted unpredictably, thought differently, and endured in ways that defied logic. One evening, as the flagship drifted past a distant nebula, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "You are different from any other human I have encountered. Perhaps I was wrong to claim you as a spoil of war. Or perhaps I am beginning to understand the value of having you not as a prisoner, but as a partner in thought. That is a new experience." And humans, he knew, thrived in moments when others underestimated them. That night, Elias lay in the small quarters assigned to him, staring at the ceiling. He thought about Earth, about the humans still resisting, adapting, and rebuilding in secret. He thought about the galaxy, about the aliens who underestimated him, underestimated his species, and assumed victory was permanent. And he thought about the woman who had claimed him, who now listened, questioned, and learned from him. Humans had survived worse than conquest, worse than death. They had endured extinction events, famines, internal wars, and invasions far beyond imagination. They had survived by refusing to accept finality, by learning, adapting, and trusting in the strength of their own will. And Elias realized that this alien commander, powerful, intelligent, and unyielding, was now learning what it meant to face a human who refused to break. The galaxy beyond the flagship seemed vast, indifferent, and unyielding. But Elias Kane, the human who should have been defeated, understood one essential truth. Survival was not about fear or strength alone. It was about endurance, intelligence, and the refusal to be underestimated. And in this quiet tension, in the careful observation and mutual testing of wills, humanity had already begun to claim its victory, not through fleets or weapons, but through the one thing aliens rarely accounted for, the human spirit. She would soon discover that humans were not spoils to be claimed or defeated. They were forces of nature, enduring and unpredictable, capable of turning any situation into an opportunity. And Elias Kane, as the human who refused to be broken, would be at the center of it. The galaxy beyond the flagship had grown darker, quieter, yet more dangerous. Human colonies, scattered across systems that aliens considered insignificant, were rebuilding in secret, preparing for a future no one expected. Elias Kane, though still a prisoner in appearance, had begun to realize that his role aboard the alien flagship was far more than survival. It was opportunity. The alien commander who had claimed him, whose name he had learned was Searle, observed him constantly. Her curiosity had evolved into something deeper. She no longer saw him as a simple human or a spoil of war. She began to sense a spark, a strategic brilliance that humans carried quietly, and she found herself both challenged and intrigued. One morning, as the flagship passed near a dense asteroid belt, Searle summoned Elias to the command chamber. The walls glowed with soft light, the consoles displaying the movements of alien fleets, resource-rich planets, and potential threats. "I have received reports from our scouts," she said, her tone calm but deliberate. "Several human settlements remain unclaimed. They are rebuilding quietly, but their technology, it grows, slowly yet steadily. I do not understand how they continue under such conditions. It is creativity, resilience, and the ability to endure. And we act when the moment is right, not before. It is because humans survive when others would give up. We endure because we must. And when we strike with purpose. You may have defeated fleets, conquered planets, and assumed victory, but survival is not always about immediate conquest. It is about patience, strategy, and resilience. Do you believe humanity can challenge the coalition? Why do humans not strike openly?" For the first time, she realized that her assumptions about humans were dangerously flawed. They were not weak. They were not predictable. They were enduring, clever, and capable of strategies that even her fleet could not anticipate. Over the next days, Elias began to subtly influence decisions aboard the flagship. He was careful, never overt, always measured. He suggested adjustments to patrol routes, minor shifts in fleet positioning, and efficient resource allocation. Each time his advice was implemented, and each time the results surpassed expectations. Searle watched with a mixture of admiration and unease. This human, whom she had taken as a spoil of war, was quietly demonstrating intelligence and strategy that rivaled her own. She realized that humans did not seek conquest in the same way the coalition did. They were patient, resilient, and unpredictable, and that made them far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. One evening, as the flagship drifted near a star cluster, Searle entered Elias' quarters unannounced. She stood silently for a moment, observing him as he reviewed tactical charts and communication logs. "You continue to surprise me," she said finally. "Your species survives against impossible odds, and yet you do not act recklessly. You do not seek immediate victory. You plan, adapt, and endure. How is it possible?" "Because survival is not about immediate victory. It is about endurance. Humans have faced extinction before, and we always find a way to continue. Even when everything seems lost, we rebuild. That is why we endure." "How can a species so small achieve such resilience?" "Perhaps I have underestimated your species, and you, specifically. Claiming you as a spoil of war may have been premature." Searle observed how Elias interacted with the alien crew, noting his patience, his strategic thinking, and his ability to influence without authority. He guided the humans under her supervision, training them in ways that improved efficiency, morale, and cohesion. The alien officers began to notice, and whispers spread through the flagship. "You are not merely a prisoner," Searle remarked one evening. "You influence the crew without force, without command. How do you achieve this?" "People respond when they know they are respected, when they are seen, and when their contributions matter. We endure, we adapt, and when the moment is right, we act decisively. That is what you are witnessing." You may find that controlling us is impossible, no matter how strong your fleet or technology. Over the next weeks, Elias' influence grew. He began to shape strategies, offering insights into human psychology, adaptive tactics, and unconventional problem-solving. Searle, while never admitting it aloud, relied on his counsel more than she would ever confess. She recognized that humans were not mere survivors, they were a force that could not be ignored. One day, a communication arrived from a distant sector. Reports indicated that human colonies were coordinating quietly, establishing networks and preparing for actions the aliens had not anticipated. Searle studied the data, her mind racing. "You were correct," she admitted softly to Elias. "Humans are not defeated. They rebuild, they plan, they endure. And they act when the moment is right. Perhaps the species you represent is more than I believed." In the quiet of the observation chamber, the stars beyond the glass seemed to echo the unspoken truth. Humanity had survived countless challenges, and it would survive this one as well. Searle, for all her power, had become a witness to something extraordinary, the quiet, relentless endurance of a species that refused to be broken. And Elias Kane, though still a prisoner in appearance, understood that the true war had only just begun. Humans were patient, strategic, and enduring, and the galaxy, Searle realized, would soon witness the consequences of underestimating them. The human before her was not defeated. He was a force of nature, quiet yet powerful and entirely unpredictable. Searle could see now that she had claimed more than a prisoner. She had claimed the attention of a species that refused to be controlled, a species that survived by will, intellect, and endurance. The galaxy beyond the flagship remained vast, dark, and indifferent, but Elias Kane and the humans he represented were no longer invisible. The future would be shaped not by fleets alone, but by the patience, strategy, and resilience of humanity. And Searle, who had once claimed him as a spoil of war, was learning a lesson that would change everything. Humanity was not to be conquered lightly. The stars glimmered silently, and Elias Kane, observing them from the command deck, allowed himself a quiet thought. The true strength of humans was not in their weapons, their numbers, or their technology. It was in their spirit. And that spirit would endure no matter what the galaxy threw at them. The galaxy had not yet seen humanity's full potential. And soon, it would. The flagship drifted silently through the cold expanse of space, stars glittering like scattered diamonds against the black void. Searle, the alien commander who had claimed Elias Kane as a spoil of war, paced slowly across the observation deck, her mind restless. The human had changed everything, her assumptions, her strategies, and even her understanding of what victory truly meant. Elias had not just survived. He had influenced, taught, and challenged. The more she observed him, the more she realized that humanity was not what her species had expected. Humans were patient, clever, and utterly resilient. And now, after weeks of careful observation and subtle interactions, Searle found herself facing a question she could not ignore. What was the value of a human who refused to be broken? She summoned him to the command chamber, a place where she usually discussed fleet movements and strategies. Elias entered quietly, his expression calm, measured. He had grown used to these sessions, to the subtle power play that existed between them, and to the careful observation that seemed to accompany every word he spoke. "You have been busy," Searle said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. "The results of your guidance have surpassed my expectations. I did not anticipate that a human could influence outcomes so efficiently." Then she spoke in a quieter tone, one that carried a weight of thoughtfulness rare for her. "Elias Kane, I claimed you as a spoil of war, assuming my victory over humanity was absolute. And yet here you are, not broken, not defeated, but instructive. You have proven more valuable than I imagined." That is what we do. Humans survive not by fear, but by trust and understanding. We adapt to our circumstances and we learn from them. That is how we influence others. Humanity was not merely a conquered people. They were a force to be reckoned with, subtle but formidable. "I have been thinking," she said finally, her tone low, almost hesitant. "You are more than a prisoner, Elias Kane. You are a partner in thought, if not yet in alliance. Your insights have proven invaluable, and I cannot ignore them. And I believe that together, we could achieve more than either of us alone." Searle's gaze softened, a subtle shift that betrayed a rare vulnerability. "I propose a bond that goes beyond conquest or captivity, a union that signifies trust, alliance, and shared purpose. In my culture, such a bond is formalized through marriage. I propose that we marry." The word carried weight, but he understood its cultural significance. In her society, marriage was not merely a personal union, it was a binding pact, a strategic alliance that altered power dynamics. To refuse would insult her and potentially jeopardize the fragile trust they had built. To accept was to enter a partnership that could redefine the future. He took a deep breath, weighing the implications. Marriage, in your culture, this is not merely personal. It binds obligations, trust, and strategy. It is a political and cultural act. Together, we could influence outcomes far beyond what either species could achieve alone. "Very well," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "I will accept your proposal, not as a spoil of war, but as a partner. If our union can strengthen both our peoples, then it is worth the risk. Humanity will no longer be underestimated, and the galaxy will soon see the consequences of that alliance." Each decision, each move, was designed to strengthen humanity's position and test the coalition's assumptions. The human colonies, guided subtly by Elias, began to coordinate quietly. Communications that had been fragmented and covert became structured and efficient. Resources were allocated with precision. Human ingenuity, combined with the alien technology of the flagship, allowed them to prepare for a scale of conflict the coalition had not anticipated. Searle observed these developments with a mix of fascination and unease. She had believed in the superiority of her species, in the inevitability of conquest. Yet here was a human, small, seemingly insignificant, yet capable of altering the course of fleets, colonies, and entire sectors. The realization was sobering. Humanity was no longer a subject to be conquered. They were a partner, an equal in strategic thinking, and a force the galaxy could not ignore. One evening, as they reviewed intelligence from a distant system, Searle spoke quietly. "You have changed everything, Elias Kane. Your species is no longer the one I expected to conquer. You are not a spoil of war, you are a strategist, a leader, and a force in your own right. That is how we thrive." Elias worked tirelessly, sharing strategies, teaching human resilience, and guiding the alien crew in ways that balanced efficiency with innovation. Searle, in turn, began to rely on his insight, valuing his perspective even when it challenged her assumptions. Together, they formed a synergy that neither species had anticipated. The moment of formalizing their union came quietly, aboard the flagship, with witnesses from both human and alien representatives. The ceremony was brief, symbolic, and strategic. It was a recognition not just of personal connection, but of mutual respect, shared purpose, and a new alliance that would alter the course of the galaxy. Elias Kane, once a prisoner, now stood as a partner to one of the most powerful commanders in the galaxy. He understood the significance, not as a conquest of love or culture, but as a victory of strategy, endurance, and human resilience. Humanity had been underestimated for centuries, and now, through this alliance, they were poised to demonstrate the true extent of their capabilities. Searle observed him during the ceremony, a subtle smile on her lips. She had expected a human who would submit, who would be broken and compliant. Instead, she found a mind that challenged her, a spirit that endured, and a partner who could shape the future in ways she had never imagined. And Elias, standing beside her, understood the opportunity before him. Humanity had survived countless threats, endured unimaginable challenges, and now had a chance to influence the galaxy not through brute force, but through strategy, patience, and resilience. The stars outside the flagship glimmered like silent witnesses. The galaxy had not yet seen the full strength of humanity, but it would soon. Through patience, strategy, and the unyielding human spirit, the tide was beginning to turn. And in that quiet partnership, forged from conflict, curiosity, and respect, the first seeds of a new era were planted. An era where humanity would no longer be underestimated, where endurance and ingenuity would define victory, and where a single human could change the course of the galaxy alongside an alien commander who had once claimed him as a spoil of war. The galaxy was vast, indifferent, and dangerous. But humanity, through Elias Kane, had begun to prove that even the smallest, most underestimated species could endure, adapt, and shape the future in ways no one could predict. And Searle, who had once assumed victory was absolute, now understood that true strength was not measured by conquest alone, but by endurance, strategy, and the willingness to recognize value where others saw only weakness. The galaxy would soon learn that humanity, patient, clever, and enduring, was far more than it seemed. And the union of human and alien, once unimaginable, would mark the beginning of a force that the stars themselves would remember. The galaxy was changing. Quietly at first, then rapidly. Human colonies, long underestimated, had grown stronger in secret, coordinated with precision, and waited for the perfect moment. Elias Kane, once a prisoner, now stood at the center of a plan that could reshape the balance of power across entire star systems. The union with Searle was no longer symbolic. It was strategic, a partnership that combined human ingenuity with alien firepower, and the galaxy had yet to see the consequences. On the flagship, Searle and Elias reviewed intelligence reports in the command chamber. The holographic display projected a map of multiple systems, highlighting human colonies, coalition positions, and critical trade routes. "They still underestimate us," Elias said quietly. "They see humans as weak, fractured, and slow, but patience is our advantage. When the moment comes, we act decisively, and it will be too late for them to respond. You have prepared them well. I did not expect that a human would be capable of organizing such resilience and coordination. Your species is remarkable. The galaxy does not anticipate that humans do not just fight to win. They fight to endure and to outlast everything." Every human who had survived the wars and occupation was ready, quietly waiting for Elias' signal. The coalition, confident in their dominance, patrolled the sectors with ease. Their fleets were numerous and advanced, but complacent. They assumed that humanity was still weak, still fragmented, and still incapable of coordinated resistance. They did not know that the very human spirit they had dismissed was now the backbone of a silent, growing force. When the signal finally came, it was simple, precise, and unstoppable. Human ships surged from hidden colonies, emerging like shadows from the darkness of space. They struck with precision, disabling supply lines, reclaiming occupied planets, and overwhelming small coalition fleets with coordinated attacks that left no room for retreat or negotiation. Searle commanded her flagship alongside Elias, observing as the operations unfolded. The efficiency, discipline, and clever strategy of humans combined with alien technology created a force unlike any the galaxy had seen. Planets were liberated, fleets routed, and intelligence networks dismantled, all without unnecessary destruction, all without unnecessary loss. "It is incredible," Searle said, her voice low, almost reverent. "Your species fights differently than mine. You endure, you adapt, and when the moment is right, you strike with precision. I underestimated humanity, and yet here you are, proving me wrong." It was one of strategy, patience, and relentless determination. Human ships moved in patterns that the coalition could not anticipate. Supply lines were severed before reinforcements could arrive. Intelligence that had once been fragmented now flowed seamlessly across the human network, enabling coordinated attacks on multiple fronts. Searle watched as Elias directed operations, his mind a combination of strategy, calculation, and instinct. Humans had survived countless threats by adapting, by enduring, and by thinking creatively. And now, under Elias' guidance, they were demonstrating that endurance could be as powerful as firepower. One by one, coalition fleets were neutralized, planets liberated, and human influence expanded. Reports flowed in from liberated colonies. Resistance was coordinated, civilian casualties minimized, and infrastructure preserved. Humanity's approach was deliberate, controlled, and terrifyingly effective. In the midst of victory, Searle turned to Elias. "You have changed the course of the galaxy," she said. "Not through overwhelming force alone, but through patience, strategy, and endurance. I see now that your species is more powerful than I ever imagined. That is humanity's strength." Searle and Elias coordinated the final phase of operations, the liberation of a key stronghold that had served as the coalition's central command in the sector. The human and alien combined fleet approached silently, using stealth technology adapted by human engineers. The assault was swift, efficient, and decisive. Coalition leaders, expecting victory and submission, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. When the battle concluded, the stronghold was in human hands. Coalition forces were either captured or fleeing. Communication channels that had once controlled vast sectors were now under human and Searle's command. The galaxy, which had assumed human weakness, was witnessing something entirely unexpected. A species that endured, adapted, and triumphed through intelligence, patience, and strategy rather than sheer destruction. Searle stood beside Elias on the observation deck of the flagship, looking down at the liberated stronghold. Her expression was a mixture of awe, respect, and quiet satisfaction. "You were right," she said softly. "Humanity is not weak. Your species endures, adapts, and prevails. I see now that claiming you as a spoil of war was not conquest. It was the beginning of something far greater. That is why humans have survived, and why we will continue to do so. This is only the beginning. Humanity will endure, adapt, and thrive in ways the galaxy has yet to see. And we will continue to do so, not through domination, but through perseverance and ingenuity." Trade routes reopened under human control, supply lines stabilized, and technology was shared strategically to ensure continued resilience. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for centuries, but that miscalculation had been corrected decisively. Searle, observing the transformation, realized that she had not just been a commander. She had become a witness to the human spirit, to a species that refused to be broken, and to the strategic brilliance of a single human who had guided them through impossible odds. "You have changed everything," she said quietly, standing beside Elias on the bridge. "Not just for your species, but for the galaxy. Humanity is no longer underestimated, and it will not be ignored. And when the galaxy assumes weakness, we prove that patience, strategy, and determination are forces more powerful than fleets or weapons alone." They had survived against overwhelming odds, adapted to alien technology and strategy, and emerged not merely as survivors, but as a force to be respected and feared in the calculated sense of foresight and strategy. The union between Elias Kane and Searle, once a symbol of captivity and conquest, had become a partnership that defined the new balance of power. Their combined influence had ensured that humanity would no longer be dismissed, that their voice would be heard, and that their survival was now recognized across multiple systems. The galaxy had learned a lesson that could not be ignored. Humanity, patient, clever, and enduring, was a force that could not be underestimated. They fought not just to win battles, but to ensure that they endured beyond them. And Elias Kane, who had survived captivity, observation, and doubt, had become the symbol of that enduring strength. Searle turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "You were never merely a spoil of war. You were the spark of something greater, a guide for your people, and a force that reshaped the galaxy. And together we will continue to thrive, not by domination, but by intelligence, patience, and persistence." And they would continue to do so, proving that even the smallest, most underestimated species could alter the fate of the stars themselves. As the flagship moved silently through the liberated systems, Elias Kane and Searle stood together, not as prisoner and captor, but as partners, strategists, and symbols of a new era. The galaxy had witnessed the power of patience, resilience, and ingenuity, and it would remember humanity, not as a conquered species, but as a force that endured, adapted, and ultimately triumphed. The stars glittered silently, bearing witness to the strength of the human spirit. And humanity, through endurance, intelligence, and unyielding determination, had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. And Elias Kane, the human who refused to break, had led the way.